I served as a royal guard at Windsor Castle for 8 years. I thought I knew every secret corridor, every hidden room. But nothing could have prepared me for what we found beneath the Queen's Chapel at midnight on November 12, 2011. What I saw that night didn't just cost me my job, it shattered everything I believed about the British royal family. And if you think you know who really runs England, you're about to discover a truth so terrifying that they've been silencing people for centuries to keep it hidden. My name is Marcus Thornfield, and for 8 years Windsor Castle was not just my workplace, it was my world. I was part of the Royal Guard, specializing in night security for the most sensitive areas of the royal family. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need someone to know the truth before they find me. It all started with Harrison. Chief Superintendent William Harrison had been working in castle security for 23 years when I first met him in 2009. He was the kind of man who commanded respect without saying a word, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the bearing of someone who had seen a lot. While other guards rotated shifts, Harrison specifically requested the permanent night duty. At the time, I thought it was just a preference. Now I understand it was a state of alertness. "Thornfield," he told me during my 3rd week on night patrol, "there are rules here that aren't written in any guidebook." I was 24 then, fresh out of the army, eager to prove myself. "What kind of rules, sir?" Harrison stopped walking and turned to me in the dim corridor. His eyes were serious and tired. "Never go down under the chapel. If you have maintenance work in the sub-basement levels, do your job and get out. Don't be curious. Don't follow the cold tunnels." And he paused, as if deciding what to say next. "If the Queen's personal guard tells you to clear the lower levels completely, ask no questions." "Sir, the reason for these—" "Thornfield," his voice was low but firm, "this castle is 900 years old. If some walls could talk, you'd hear screams. Some doors remain locked for a reason, and some sounds you wish you'd never heard." That night, I took Harrison's words as merely the warnings of an experienced guard to a novice. How wrong I was. The first strange incident came a month later. During the midnight patrol, I was passing near St. George's Chapel. Just then I heard a low rumble coming from deep within the stone pavement. It wasn't the generator, it was much deeper. Constant, like high-voltage electricity. The next day I asked the other personnel. They shrugged. "It's an old castle, Marcus. It always makes noises." But Harrison reacted differently. When I described the hum to him, his face tensed. "What time?" "Around midnight, sir." "Which nights?" "It's more pronounced on Tuesday and Friday nights." Harrison nodded silently. "Thornfield, from now on your night rounds, go around the chapel. Don't go directly over it." "But, sir, the standard route—" "Fuck the standard route," he growled, which was very uncharacteristic of Harrison. "Some protocols are about survival, not getting promoted." The second incident happened 2 weeks later. While on night shift, Security Chief McGregor gave a sudden order. "Completely evacuate the lower floor of the West Wing. Routine electrical maintenance," he said, but no electricians ever arrived, and the lights never went out. That night I found Harrison. He was sitting in the security room, looking at an old notebook. "Harrison, about the order to evacuate the lower floors tonight." "I know." He closed the notebook. Its cover bore the words "Personnel Records Confidential" in gold lettering. "Marcus, I want to show you something." He led me through the corridors to a rarely used area beneath the kitchens. It was filled with old kitchen equipment and dusty shelves. Behind the old copper pots, I saw it. Unlike the rest of the castle, it wasn't an old wooden door with iron hinges. It was a solid steel door, modern, handleless, the kind you'd see in a bunker or a laboratory. Next to it, a unmarked numeric keypad. It made no sense. It was a technological anomaly in the heart of a 900-year-old castle. "What is this?" I whispered. Harrison touched the steel surface of the door. It was cold, vibrating slightly. "This, Marcus, is where the truth begins, and the door your grandfather warned you about." "Your grandfather? Which grandfather?" Harrison turned to me. "Not your grandfather, son, mine. He served this castle too. Before he died, he told me the same things I'm telling you now." His eyes were shining. "What lies behind this door is what truly keeps this castle standing, and God help you if you ever see that door open. What happens? Then you're no longer Marcus Thornfield. You're a witness, and witnesses don't live long."
After leaving Harrison that night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the steel door wouldn't leave my mind. The next day I researched online, studying the plans and history of Windsor Castle. There was no mention of such a door in the official records. 3 days later, Harrison died. They said it was a heart attack. He was found in the security room, sitting at his old desk. The file was gone. The only thing left on Harrison's desk was a note scribbled hastily on a scrap of paper. "MT. Be careful on Tuesday nights. Be ready when they come. MT. Marcus Thornfield." He had left me a message. For those reading this far, do you think Harrison's death was really a coincidence? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I was wondering the same thing back then. After Harrison's funeral, the new security chief, who replaced him, McGregor, was a completely different man. Cold, distant, military background, but no warmth whatsoever. He looked straight at me during our first meeting. "Thornfield, I hear you worked very closely with Harrison." "Yes, sir, he taught me a lot." "I hope he only taught you work-related things." His eyes were like ice. "Some of the old guards get caught up in fantasies, conspiracy theories, secret rooms, ridiculous stories. You don't seem young or naive enough to believe such nonsense." Was this an open threat, or just a warning? That week, strange orders started coming in. Constant evacuations for routine maintenance at the lower levels. But no workers ever came, no real maintenance was done. Only us being taken out, then brought back in again. Tuesday night arrived, the night Harrison had warned about. After midnight, while on patrol, I heard that hum again. This time it was louder, more insistent. My heart started racing. I followed Harrison's route, circled around the chapel. Just then, I heard footsteps in the distance. I hid. 2 people were walking by, talking, McGregor and a man I didn't recognize. "The shipment for the lower level is scheduled for 2 o'clock," said the man I didn't know. "Make sure the corridor is sterile." "What's the status of the Croft case?" McGregor's voice. "Ready. The Queen will do the final reading tonight." Croft. Julian Croft. The Member of Parliament who disappeared from the news last month. Nervous breakdown, they said. But here, in Windsor, they were talking about him at midnight. Those of you sitting at your screens listening to this story, if I were in your place, what would you do? Would you run away? Or would you stay and try to find out the truth? Because that night, I made my biggest mistake. My curiosity was greater than my fear. I followed them. McGregor and his man went to that old kitchen storage room. They stopped in front of the steel door. McGregor entered a code on the keypad. The door opened silently. A white, sterile light came from inside. It was just like a hospital corridor. And that smell, a mixture of antiseptic and decay. 10 minutes, said McGregor. Everything must be ready before the Queen arrives. The Queen? What business could Queen Elizabeth possibly have here in this labyrinth? I waited after the door closed. Half an hour passed. Then footsteps. More people were coming. I hid in the shadows. This time there were 3 of them. One was McGregor, another was a guard I didn't recognize, and the third was Julian Croft. But he wasn't the confident, charismatic politician from the television. He was a pale man, his eyes wide with fear, his hands trembling. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit as if it were a prisoner's uniform. "Please, this is a mistake. I was just asking questions, just doing my job," Croft whispered. "Mr. Croft," McGregor's voice was ice. "The time for questions is over. Now is the time for answers." He entered the code on the keypad. The door opened. That sterile light came in again. And this time I heard it more clearly. A voice from afar. An old woman's voice, slowly reading aloud. They pushed Croft inside. The door closed. Standing there that night, on the cold stone floor, I realized Harrison had been right. This wasn't just a castle, it was a kind of prison, and I had chosen to go deeper into it.
After seeing Croft taken behind that door, my life changed completely. I spent days thinking, researching, examining old records. I tried to remember each of the clues Harrison had given me, and the terrible truth slowly took shape before me. Julian Croft hadn't really had a nervous breakdown or gone abroad for treatment. He was behind that door, deep within Windsor Castle, under the Queen's personal supervision. By the way, if you, like me, can't sleep at night thinking about these things, you're not alone. Share your similar experiences in the comments. Sometimes reality can be far more terrifying than fiction. Over the following weeks, I began observing that steel door. I went to that old storage area whenever I could. I noted the guards waiting at the door, the comings and goings, the timing. And what I realized was how systematic this operation was. Every Tuesday and Friday night, activity occurred after midnight. First, the lower levels were cleared. Then the shipments arrived. But these were human shipments, and they were all one way. They went in, but none ever came out. In the 3rd week, when I mustered the courage to look closer, what I saw froze me in my tracks. There was a small ventilation grill, camouflaged by the metal wall next to the door. Light seeped through it, and if I pressed my ear against it, I could hear sounds.
The first voice I heard was that of the old woman. It was Queen Elizabeth's voice, but she wasn't speaking in her warm, grandmotherly tone from the television. She was reading in a cold, emotionless, almost robotic manner. Sir William Blackwood, the man who questioned the Yorkshire land dispute, March 15th, 1847, and the light never found him again. Lady Margaret Ashworth, who attempted to disclose the King's private letters, October 7th, 1923, and the light never found her again. Dr. Benjamin Clark, who investigated inconsistencies in the Royal Health Records, June 12, 1978, and the light never found him again. The list went on, name after name, date after date, and after each one the same sentence, and the light never found him again. Those listening to this story now, have you ever wondered how many people we don't know about disappeared simply for asking troublesome questions? The thought is chilling, isn't it? But the truly freezing moment came when I heard Julian Croft's voice. "Please stop," he begged. "I understand now. I won't say anything. I'll disappear. I'll go to another country. Just don't add me to this list." The Queen's voice didn't change. She continued reading, cold and emotionless. "And now," said the Queen, "Julian Croft, Chairman of the Parliamentary Inquiry Committee, investigating illegalities in the royal finances, November 12, 2011, and the light never touched him again." "No!" Croft's scream echoed off the walls of the chamber. Then silence. A long, terrible silence. That night I escaped from the head of that grill, but there was no turning back now. I knew the truth, and the truth was following me. The next day, McGregor called me into his office. He was sitting at his desk, looking over a file. The file said, "Thornfield, Marcus." "Marcus," he said, looking at me over his glasses, "what are you doing out so late?" My heart started racing, but I tried to look calm. "Routine patrols, sir, following the routes Harrison taught me." "Ah, Harrison." McGregor smiled, but his eyes didn't. "That poor old man. This job always ends in paranoia, following shadows, hearing voices that aren't there, seeing doors." He paused and looked at me. "Have you started seeing shadows too, Marcus?" "No, sir." "Good, because men who chase shadows always end the same way. Heart attack, just like Harrison." The threat was clear and direct, but it was too late now. I knew too much. When I returned home that night, I realized I was being followed. The same car, the same two men, there when I left for work in the morning and when I returned home in the evening. My phone started ringing, but no one was speaking. I only heard that familiar buzzing sound, the sound coming from the lower floors. A week later, as I was returning home from work, a man was waiting at the door of my apartment building. He was old, with white hair, but his eyes were extremely alert. He stood up when he saw me. "Are you Marcus Thornfield?" "Who are you?" "My name is Thomas Whittemore. I'm a former royal archivist. I've been retired for 15 years, and I know Harrison spoke to you." "How do you know Harrison?" "Because I too once saw that steel door, and I too once heard that list." His eyes focused on the past. "In 1987, I was a young archivist. I was working with documents at Windsor, and one night I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. What did you see? The same things you saw, but I managed to escape. I spent 15 years keeping silent. He pulled an old, yellowed photograph from his pocket. But the time for silence is over.
I looked at the photo. It was like a 17th century map, but it showed Windsor Castle, and beneath the castle, a complex network of tunnels was drawn. What is this? It's real, said Whitmore. The tunnel system beneath Windsor isn't limited to Windsor. It extends all the way to London, to Parliament, Buckingham Palace, the Tower of London. A network. And at every node in this network, there is a lower level. How many of you listening to the story right now truly believe that such secret networks exist? Because after I saw that photo, I no longer believed in coincidence. Why are you telling me this? Because Harrison asked me to do something for you. The last time we met, he said, if Harrison Thornfield ever learns the truth, help him. He's a good kid, and he might be the one to stand up to the system. Stand up to the system? That's impossible. They're the royal family, the government, the security services. It's not impossible, Marcus. It's difficult, but not impossible. Because the system has a weakness. It has to remain secret. If the truth comes out, if the public learns what it is, the system collapses. How can we bring the truth out? No one will believe us. They will if there's proof. And the proof is right here. The main records room beneath Windsor. The entire list is there. All the dates, all the missing people. Records kept for centuries. How can we get in there? We can't, he said, but you can. You still work there. You still have access, and I can teach you how. That night, Thomas Whitmore showed me the real blueprint of Windsor, the secret passages, the alternate routes, the weak points in the security systems. And he gave me something else. Harrison, final gift. It was a small brass key. It had a crown on the top and a spiral winding down. What is this? The key to the lower-level master record room. Harrison kept it hidden for years. Now, it's yours. When I took the key in my hand, the metal was cold and heavy, and I could sense the weight of centuries of pain in my hands. Marcus, said Whitmore, if you're going to do this, know there's no turning back. They'll find you, and once they do, you'll be on the list too.
Thomas Whitmore's plan was simple but dangerous. On Friday night at 2:30 a.m., while the lower levels were being evacuated for routine maintenance, I had to enter the records room and gather evidence by photographing the documents. Whitmore had given me a special camera, silent, flashless, digital. Once you're inside, you have 10 minutes, he said, no more. Security patrols check that area every 15 minutes. By the way, have you ever had to make such a risky decision in your life? It seems so easy in the moment, but you're actually making a choice that will change your whole life. Share your similar experiences in the comments. Sometimes learning the truth is more important than staying safe. I prepared all week. I memorized the routes, noted the timings, and identified the blind spots of the security cameras. And then Friday night came. At 2:15 a.m., I heard McGregor's low-level maintenance order. All the guards were pulled to the upper floors. I pretended to follow, but actually hid in one of the secret passages Harrison had taught me about. I moved at 2:30 a.m. When I reached the old kitchen storage room, I saw the steel door was open. That sterile white light was seeping out from inside. My heart was beating so fast I couldn't breathe. But there was no turning back now. I stepped through the door, and what I saw was far more terrifying than I had imagined.
It was a long, white corridor. The walls were smooth, made of a material like plastic or ceramic. Silver pipes and thin cables ran along the ceiling, and on either side of the corridor, cells. But these weren't traditional prisons with iron bars. They were transparent glass or acrylic cubes. Inside each one, there were people. The first cell held an old man. He wore a grey jumpsuit, a metal collar around his neck, and similar bracelets on his wrists and ankles connected by thin cables to a unit on the wall. He was moving, but very slowly, as if underwater. His face was expressionless. In the second cell was a middle-aged woman. Same situation. Grey jumpsuit, metal collar, and cables. But she wasn't moving at all. She just stood in the middle of her cell, staring ahead with empty eyes. Julian Croft was in the third cell. When I looked at him, I almost didn't recognize him. The terrified man I had seen a week ago was gone, replaced by an empty shell. His eyes were open, but he seemed to see nothing. He just stood there. The observers, have you ever wondered where the people we call lost really are? Until I saw this scene, I too thought they were simply killed. The truth was far more terrifying. I reached the metal door at the end of the corridor. I took out the brass key Whitmore had given me. When I turned the lock, the door opened silently. The recording room was completely different from the rest of Windsor Castle. Modern, with computer screens, filing cabinets, metal tables. But the most impressive thing was the giant screen on the wall. It showed a map of England, and on the map were hundreds of red dots. Each dot represented a lower level: Windsor, London, Edinburgh, Manchester, Liverpool. There was at least one dot in every major city. In some places, there were several. On one of the desks lay a thick book with a black leather cover. I opened it. Pages upon pages of handwritten lists. Names, dates, crimes. Margaret Thorne, 1823, made allegations about the king's illness. Dr. James Mitchell, 1856, questioned the royal medical records. Sarah Pemberton, 1901, discovered inconsistencies in the royal family tree. And the list went on, page after page, century after century, over 1,500 people. They were all here for the same reason. They had asked too many questions. When I reached the last pages, I saw names from recent times. Dr. Eleanor Vance, 2007, investigated Prince Andrew's financial connections. Michael Davidson, 2009, tried to expose illegalities in royal property transactions. And Julian Croft, 2011, initiated a parliamentary inquiry. And the last page was blank. But at the bottom there was a note written in pencil. Marcus Thornfield, 2011. Too curious. I froze. My name was there. They were already waiting for me.
I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw McGregor at the door. 2 guards stood beside him, but he was smiling. "Marcus Thornfield," he said calmly. "Right on time." I tried to run, but the guards were already in position. I dropped the camera. It shattered. "Don't worry," said McGregor. "Taking pictures wasn't important anyway. We wanted you to come here." "Why?" "Because you're special, Marcus. You're not just a curious guard. You're a message." "What do you mean?" McGregor picked up the large book on the table and opened a page, an old page from the early 1800s. William Pennell Hagen, 1847, discovered the existence of the lower levels and tried to make it public. Pennell Hagen, the name Harrison mentioned. William Pennell Hagen's grandson, Arthur Pennell Hagen, worked here in the 1920s. He was curious too. And Arthur's son, Thomas Pennell Hagen, in the 1960s. One per generation. Each generation the same curiosity, and each generation the same end. I'm not a Pennell Hagen. No, but you are their heir. Harrison chose you because he was a Pennell Hagen too. You never knew your grandfather, did you, Marcus? My heart stopped. Harrison. Was he my grandfather? William Harrison Pennell Hagen. He changed his name, hid his past, but blood is blood, and blood always seeks the truth. By the way, viewers, have you ever wondered about mysterious deaths or missing persons in your family history? Perhaps there are many more connections we don't know about. Share your thoughts in the comments. What happens now? I asked. Now you'll be added to the list. But first, the Queen wants to see you. They took me back down the corridor. As we passed Julian Croft's cell, I looked at him. He showed no reaction. He wasn't there anymore. Just an empty body. We passed through another door at the end of the corridor. This was a larger room, furnished with black leather chairs and old wooden furniture. It was like a traditional English library, but underground. And in one of the chairs sat Queen Elizabeth, dressed in a black gown, holding a large black leather book. Queen Elizabeth. She looked at me and smiled. But it wasn't the warm, grandmotherly smile you see on TV. It was cold, calculating, predatory. Marcus Thornfield, we finally meet.
As Queen Elizabeth looked at me, I felt the atmosphere in the room completely change. This woman was not the elderly, harmless grandmother we saw on television. There was a centuries-old coldness in her eyes, a calculating intelligence. It was as if she could read my mind. "Sit down, Marcus," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite the armchair. Her voice wasn't commanding, but it carried an undeniable authority. McGregor and the guards stood behind me, but the Queen motioned for them to leave. "Leave us alone." Just the two of us remained. The Queen opened the black book in her hand and began flipping through the pages. "This book," she said, "is 500 years old. Each page tells a story. Stories of how power is preserved, how stability is maintained. And you, Marcus, are you ready to be a new page?" "Why?" I asked. "Why all this?" The Queen smiled. "Because you don't understand the truth. You don't understand what power is." She closed the book and placed it on the table beside her. "Look around you, Marcus. This castle is 900 years old. This royal family has stood for 1,000 years. Why? How?" I didn't answer. "Because we are not just symbols. We are the order itself. And order demands sacrifice. Every generation, a few people ask too many questions. They are too curious. They try to learn too much. And these people, they create danger.
Julian Croft was just doing his job, his parliamentary duty. Julian Croft, the Queen's voice hardened, was trying to undermine the foundations of the state. Do you think his questions about the royal finances were just about money? No. Those questions were the beginning of questioning our legitimacy. And once legitimacy is questioned, chaos. I finished. Absolute chaos. She stood up and walked over to the large painting on the wall of the room. The painting was an old portrait of Windsor Castle, but underneath it was a text written in small letters. Order through sacrifice. Those listening to this now, have you ever thought about what sacrifices were made to establish social order? Perhaps the stability we see is actually built on what we don't see. Share your thoughts on this in the comments. Marcus, said the Queen, looking at the painting, you learned a lot from Harrison, but you didn't learn the most important lesson. What is that? That some secrets must be kept. She turned to me. Harrison was smart. He kept quiet for years, but in the end, he showed weakness. He told you too much. He was my grandfather. Yes, and you are here as his grandson. But Harrison's mistake was trying to pass on the secret. A secret is not an inheritance, Marcus. A secret is a burden. The Queen picked up the book again and opened it to a specific page. William Harrison Penhaligon, 1987, discovered inconsistencies in the archive records and tried to pass them on to his nephew. My eyes widened. Was Harrison already on the list? Of course, but he was smart. He cooperated. He worked for us. He was a loyal guardian for years, and in return, we let him live. The Queen's eyes sparkled. Until he started telling you the secrets. You killed him. We don't kill anyone. We just make adjustments. Harrison's heart stopped because he couldn't bear the burden. The weight of the secret crushed him. The atmosphere in the room grew even heavier. The Queen sat back down and looked directly at me. Now I'm going to make you an offer, Marcus, the same offer I made to Harrison in 1987. Choose. What choice? Option 1, cooperate, work for us, forget what you saw, erase what you know. In return, you can return to your normal life, get promoted, get married, have children, but never, ever investigate these matters again. Option 2. The Queen opened the last page of the book. She pointed to the blank page. Option 2. Be on this page. Move into the cell next to Julian Croft, and for the next 100 years, be an example to other curious souls who come. If you were in this situation, what would you choose? Your own safety or the chance to uncover the truth? Because sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones between two bad options. Isn't there a third option? I asked. The Queen laughed. Of course there is. The third option is to try to escape, but that option isn't really an option. Why? Because, Marcus, this isn't just Windsor. This system covers all of England, in fact, the whole world. In every country, every capital city, there are similar sublevels. There's nowhere you can escape to. I don't believe you. I stood up. You don't have to. The Queen pressed a button on the table. A screen on the wall of the room opened. A map of the world appeared on it. And on the map, there were hundreds, thousands of red dots.
From Washington to Moscow, from Beijing to Paris, everywhere. This isn't just the British system, Marcus. This is a global order. And you, she looked at me, you're just a small cog. The screen zoomed in. A map of Turkey appeared. There were red dots in Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir. "Nowhere is safe," said the Queen, "but cooperate and you'll be safe." At that moment, Thomas Whitmore's words came to mind. There's a weakness in the system. It must remain hidden. What if people find out? I asked. What if this system is exposed? The Queen's face changed. For the first time, I saw genuine concern. It won't. But what if it does? It won't! Her voice echoed. Then she composed herself and returned to her calm tone. It won't, because no one will believe it, and there is no evidence to believe it. What if there is evidence? The Queen jumped to her feet. What evidence? Harrison's notes were burned. Whitmore's maps are fake. Your camera is broken. What evidence? At that moment, I understood. They were afraid too. The system was powerful but fragile, and I, perhaps not alone, posed a threat. Make your decision, Marcus, but know that this decision will affect not only you, but all future generations. At that moment, the door to the room opened and MacGregor entered. Your Majesty, there's a problem. What problem? Thomas Whitmore. He escaped, and he took some documents with him. The Queen's face turned pale.
Deep. You will voice a horror story. The look on the Queen's face when she learned that Thomas Whitmore had escaped was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. That powerful, in-control woman suddenly seemed helpless. What documents? She snarled at MacGregor. Copies of the ledger, Your Majesty, and the tunnel maps. Impossible. The Queen slammed her fist on the table. Those documents cannot leave here. Whitmore has been preparing for years, Your Majesty. Hidden cameras, hidden recording devices. Bringing Marcus here was a trap. At that moment, I understood. I wasn't just a tool. Whitmore had used me to lure him here. And now he had recorded the Queen's reaction. The system's weakness. By the way, viewers, have you ever wondered how many of the events we call coincidences are actually coincidences? Maybe we are also pieces of games we don't know about. Share your experiences on this topic in the comments. Where is Whitmore? Asked the Queen. We don't know, Your Majesty, but he may be preparing to release the documents. The Queen turned to me. The cold control was gone from her eyes. There was panic. You, she said, you are also responsible for this situation. You introduced Whitmore to this information. I didn't do anything. You did? She screamed. You told Whitmore what you learned from Harrison. You started this chain of events. MacGregor stepped forward. Your Majesty, what should we do? The Queen thought for a moment. Then her cold resolve returned. Emergency protocol. All lower levels will be sealed off. All evidence will be destroyed. And, she looked at me, the witnesses will be silenced. But, Your Majesty, if Whitmore publishes the documents, he won't be able to. The Queen smiled, but this smile was even more terrifying. Those documents will be fake. The ramblings of an old, paranoid man. The media won't take him seriously. What about Marcus? Marcus, the Queen looked at me, no longer has a choice. He'll be on the list. At that moment, the lights in the room went out. The emergency lights came on. Everything looked even more terrifying under the red light. "What's happening?" the Queen shouted. Another guard rushed in through the door. "Your Majesty, the main power system has been sabotaged. All security cameras are down, and the cells are open?" "Which cells?" "All of them, Your Majesty. All the cells on the lower level are open." The Queen's face contorted in horror. "Julian Croft? The others?" "They're missing too, Your Majesty." The Queen, who had this perfect plan and thought she controlled everything, was suddenly helpless. And for the first time, I thought, not just me, but maybe the system really could collapse. Those listening to this story now, have you ever seen the most powerful-looking systems collapse when you least expected it? Sometimes justice comes at the most unexpected moments. Alarms began to sound. Footsteps and shouts echoed through the corridors. "Marcus," McGregor said, turning to me, "you—" But he couldn't finish his sentence, because at that moment, Julian Croft entered the room. But this wasn't the empty, soulless Croft I'd seen a week ago. This man was sober, angry, and he had something in his hand. A small recording device. "Everything was recorded," he said calmly. "Your conversation, your confessions, everything." The Queen stepped back. "Impossible. You can't." "I'm not under control anymore," Croft smiled. "Those devices were just messing with our heads. But when Whitmore's men rescued us, the effect wore off. And now I remember everything."
McGregor reached for his gun, but Croft was faster. "Don't move," he said, "because this recording is already being broadcast. It's being sent to all British media outlets right now. BBC, Sky News, Guardian, Times, all of them." "No!" the Queen screamed. "And not just in England," Croft continued. "CNN, RT, Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle. The whole world will learn tonight what's happening beneath Windsor Castle." At that moment, the ceiling above us shook. Explosions were heard. "What's happening?" I asked. "The final stage of Whitmore's plan," said Croft. "The entire lower levels are being blown up. Everything salvaged before the evidence was destroyed is already safe. But this place," he looked up at the ceiling, "this place is going to collapse." The Queen looked around in horror. The centuries-old system, all its power, was crumbling within minutes. "You," she said, turning to me, "you were part of this." "No," I said, standing up. "I just wanted to know the truth." "The truth?" The Queen laughed, but it was a maniacal laugh. "The truth is, you fools just plunged the world into chaos. Thanks to this system, there has been peace for centuries. There is stability. Stability built on the backs of some people. That's not justice." "Fuck justice!" She was completely mad. "Justice is idealistic nonsense. Power is real. Order is real." Another explosion sounded, this time much closer. Cracks began to run through the walls. "We have to go," Croft said. "This place is going to collapse." McGregor and the guards were trying to make escape plans, but everything was engulfed in flames and smoke. And you, dear viewers, what would you do in such a situation? Would you try to save the representatives of the collapsing system, or would you focus on saving your own life? Croft grabbed my arm. "Marcus, come with me. I know the way out." But I looked at the Queen. Did this old woman, no matter how terrible she was, deserve to be left to die? "Let's take her too," I said.
Marcus, that woman is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. But I'm not her. I reached out my hand to the Queen. Come. She looked at me, surprise in her eyes. Why? Because I am not you. At that moment, there was another explosion. The ceiling began to collapse. The Queen took my hand and we ran together. The exit was very difficult. The corridors were collapsing. Smoke filled the air. But we finally reached the outer walls of Windsor Castle. Behind us, the lower levels had completely collapsed. The fire department had arrived. Ambulances were lined up. The media was there too. Dozens of cameras, reporters. And Thomas Whitmore was there, protected by security forces, making a statement to the press. Centuries of systematic human rights violations, the direct responsibility of the royal family. The evidence is now in the hands of the people. Queen Elizabeth at that moment was just an old, tired woman. She looked at the media, seeing the end of her empire. Marcus, she said, turning to me, thank you. For saving you? No, she said. For reminding me who I am, for choosing the person, not the system.
The following days were pure chaos. The documents released by Whitmore had shaken the entire world. The images from the lower levels beneath Windsor Castle, the recording room documents, and Julian Croft's testimony had become the main news story. The BBC was broadcasting special programs live titled The Royal Scandal of the Century. Experts on CNN were discussing the collapse of the global power structure. On social media, the hashtag Windsor Files was trending worldwide. I, meanwhile, was under security. MA5 had me under surveillance under the guise of protection. According to the official story, I was an innocent guard who had unwittingly become part of a conspiracy. But the truth was much more complex. By the way, do you think real change happens when such big secrets come out? Or do the systems just reorganize themselves and carry on? Because I kept wondering about that back then. On the third day, Julian Croft came to visit me. He wasn't that empty, soulless man anymore. He was close to his old self, but there was a deep weariness in his eyes. Marcus, he said, I want to thank you. I didn't do anything. I just couldn't control my curiosity. Curiosity is sometimes the most powerful weapon, he said with a smile. I spoke to Whitmore. He said it was because of you that he was able to implement the whole plan. How so? Until you entered that recording room, he couldn't capture their reactions. The Queen's panic, McGregor's confessions, how fragile the system was. It all came out because of your courage. I looked out the window. The media trucks were still there, reporters conducting interviews. So what happens now? Now it's time for reckoning, but not just with a few people, with the entire system. The whole world knows now. Similar systems in Moscow, Washington, Beijing are starting to be exposed. That evening, watching TV, I truly grasped the scale of the news. In Russia, secret facilities under the Kremlin were being protested. In America, special security sections under the White House were being investigated by Congress. In France, documents retrieved from the basement levels of the Élysée Palace had caused a scandal. Even in Turkey, the existence of similar facilities in some government buildings in Ankara was being discussed. Watching, did you ever wonder if such secret places could exist in our country too? Those old buildings in the capital, those mysterious underground passages, who knows what they hide? A week later,
Queen Elizabeth addressed the public on television. This time, she was sitting in an ordinary room, not at Windsor Castle. There was no crown, no fancy dress, just an old, tired woman. "My dear people," she said in a trembling voice, "I owe you an apology. A system that has been going on for centuries. I was born and raised in it. But that can be no excuse." As I watched her speech, I felt something strange. I should have hated this woman, but I only felt sorrow. She, too, was perhaps a victim of the system, in a different way, but a victim nonetheless. As the royal family, the Queen continued, "I apologize to all the families who have suffered under this system, and I declare, as of today, the royal family renounces all its special privileges. The constitutional monarchy will become entirely symbolic." Do you think this was genuine remorse, or just a political maneuver? Powerful people can behave very differently when cornered. But the real shock came from Thomas Whitmore. When he visited me again that night, he had a strange look on his face. "Marcus," he said, "I want to tell you the truth." "What truth?" I was actually part of the system." I froze. "What?" "I worked for them for years, not as an archivist, but as a control mechanism. My job was to identify potential threats, integrate them into the system, or neutralize them." But you destroyed the system." "Yes," he said, smiling, "because seeing it from the inside for years was enough for me to understand how rotten the system was. You gave me the last hope, Marcus. Your purity, your honesty, it reminded me that change is still possible." "So it was all a plan?" "No, not at first. But when you told me what you learned from Harrison, I realized I couldn't let this opportunity slip away. Even if you didn't realize it, you were the catalyst, Marcus. You became the symbol of change." I thought long and hard that night. My story wasn't just the story of a guard's curiosity. It was the story of a system's collapse, the beginning of change. The following month, Windsor Castle opened to the public. The lower levels were completely restructured, this time as a museum. It opened under the name Museum of Human Rights and Abuse of Power. Visitors could see those dreadful cells, read the stories of the missing people. And I became the museum's first director. Would you have accepted such a role? Exhibiting the pains of the past, teaching future generations? It's not an easy responsibility.
On opening day, Julian Croft came too. We were standing together in that old recording studio, now boarded up, turned into an exhibition space. "Marcus," he said, "do you think things have really changed?" I looked at the world map. Now there were blue dots instead of red ones. Each blue dot represented a closed, secret facility, freed people, uncovered secrets. "It has changed," I said, "but our work isn't done. Maybe it never will be." "Why?" "Because power always tries to hide. Our job is to keep it in the light." That day, there was an elderly woman among the visitors. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. She walked through the exhibition, examining everything carefully. As she was leaving, she came over to me. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome, but do I know you?" She smiled. "Elizabeth Mountbatten Windsor, the former queen." I was stunned. What are you doing here?" She said, "Learning and remembering, and perhaps seeking a little forgiveness." That day I understood that change was possible not only in systems, but in people.
Is this the end of the story? Perhaps, but perhaps it is a new beginning, because real stories never end. They just open new chapters. After hearing this story, will you look more closely at the hidden doors, the silenced voices, the unasked questions around you? Because each of you is a potential Marcus Thornfield. Each of you can wonder, ask questions, create change. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you had similar experiences? Have you ever been warned for being too curious? And most importantly, if you were in that situation, would you open that steel door? Don't forget to follow this channel because there are many more hidden doors in the world. And maybe in the next story, you could be a witness too.